Your constant availability isn't making you valuable. It's making you background noise. Right now, someone in your life is texting you at 11 p.m. because they know you'll respond. A colleague is dumping work on you because they know you'll say yes. A friend is calling, again, with the same problem you've already helped them solve 3 times. And you're answering. Because you think this is what good people do. It's not. It's what exploited people do. I spent 2 years being the person everyone could count on. Always responsive, always helpful, always available. And the result wasn't gratitude or appreciation. It was people treating my time like it was free because I'd made it clear that it was. The moment I started saying no, something changed. Not with me. With how everyone else suddenly started respecting my time. This is what nobody tells you about availability. The more accessible you make yourself, the less people value accessing you. When something is abundant, it becomes worthless. When it's scarce, it becomes precious. You've made yourself so abundant in other people's lives that you've become invisible. This isn't about being cold or playing games. It's about recognizing that your time is finite, your energy is limited, and your attention is the most valuable thing you own. And then protecting it like it matters. We're going to walk through why constant availability destroys your value, how successful people use strategic unavailability to command respect, and what happens to your relationships when you finally set real boundaries. But more importantly, we're going to explore the internal shift that has to happen first. The moment you stop deriving your worth from being needed and start recognizing that your value exists whether anyone needs you or not. By the time you finish this, you'll understand why the people you respect most are the hardest to reach. You'll see the invisible price you've been paying for people-pleasing, and you'll know exactly how to reclaim your time, your energy, and your self-respect. Everything changes when you stop being constantly available. The only question is whether you're ready to let it. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I read every single one. It's always interesting to see where this reaches. Chapter 1. The Abundance Trap. Most people think respect comes from saying yes. It doesn't. It comes from being hard to access. Think about the most respected person you know. Not the person you like most. Not the person you're most comfortable with. But the person whose opinion actually matters. Whose presence commands attention. Whose approval you actually care about. Now answer this honestly. Are they constantly available? Do they respond to every text within minutes? Do they say yes to every invitation? Almost never. What they do instead is something much simpler. They have other things to do. Things that matter more to them than your immediate convenience. And somehow, that makes you respect them more. This is what psychologists call the scarcity principle, and it governs everything from how we value products to how we value people. When something is abundant, it loses value. Water in most places is worthless. Water in the desert becomes precious. Your attention works exactly the same way. Right now, you've made yourself so available that you've become background noise in other people's lives. You answer texts immediately. You say yes to every request. You drop everything when someone needs you. And you think this makes you valuable. You think it proves you care, that you're dedicated, that you're the kind of person people can count on. But here's what's actually happening. You're signaling infinite abundance. You're telling the world that your time is unlimited, your energy is endless, your attention is free. And when something appears unlimited and free, our brains automatically categorize it as less valuable. I watched this play out with a friend who was always available. Always. She'd respond to messages at 2 a.m. She'd drop plans to help anyone who asked. She'd stretch herself impossibly thin to accommodate everyone. And the result wasn't that people loved her more. It was that they stopped thinking about whether they were imposing. They stopped valuing her time because she'd made it clear that her time didn't have value to her. The people who do respect you most aren't respecting your availability. They're respecting your selectivity. They're respecting the fact that you have boundaries, that you say no, that getting your attention requires something from them. And that makes the attention actually mean something. This is the real abundance trap. You think you're building value through constant giving, but you're actually destroying it. When you're always accessible, accessing you becomes routine rather than special. The person who texts you at midnight knows you'll respond. The colleague who dumps work on you knows you'll say yes. The friend who only calls when they need something knows you'll be there. They've learned that your availability is guaranteed, so they stop appreciating it. They stop valuing it. They stop even noticing it's happening. Contrast this with someone who's selective. When that person makes time for you, it feels different. You know they're choosing you over something else. You know they could be somewhere else, doing something else, talking to someone else. But they're not. They're choosing to give you their attention. And that choice matters. This is the mechanism that makes scarcity work. It's not that the person is inherently more valuable when they're selective. It's that the selectivity itself creates value. It makes the interaction meaningful because you know it costs something. There's another layer to this that most people miss. When you're constantly available, you create what psychologists call a reciprocity imbalance. You're giving more than you're receiving, and instead of creating gratitude, this imbalance creates psychological discomfort in other people. They know they're getting more than they're giving. And instead of appreciating this generosity, they start to devalue what you're providing. It's easier for their minds to believe that what you're giving isn't valuable than to feel guilty about not reciprocating. So they unconsciously lower the value they assign to your contribution. You end up feeling exhausted and unappreciated, while they feel guilty and resentful. Everyone loses. The people you're trying to please by being available are the ones who respect you least. This is the cruelest part of the availability trap. The person who texts you constantly, the one who demands your time, the one who treats your availability like an entitlement, that person doesn't respect you. They're using you. And your willingness to be used is training them to keep using you. Think about how they actually treat you. Do they ask if you're busy before making requests? Do they appreciate your help, or do they assume it? Do they ever prioritize your needs the way you prioritize theirs? The answer is probably no. And that's because you've taught them that your priorities don't matter. You've shown them through your actions that you'll always rearrange your life for their convenience. So why do you keep doing it? Because being needed feels like being valued. You've confused the two, and now you're addicted to the feeling of being needed, even though being needed and being respected are almost always inversely related. The availability trap is a downward spiral. You make yourself available to prove your worth. But the more available you become, the less valuable others perceive you to be. So you make yourself even more available to try to prove your worth. And the spiral deepens. Eventually, you end up exhausted, invisible, and wondering why nobody seems to care about you despite everything you do for them. Here's what needs to happen to break the cycle. You need to understand that your worth isn't determined by your availability. It's not measured by how many requests you fulfill or how quickly you respond. It's determined by the value you actually create, by the results you deliver, by the standards you maintain. And those things only become possible when you stop being constantly available, when you protect your time, when you set boundaries, when you become selective about who gets access to you. You're not being selfish. You're being strategic. You're recognizing that your time is finite and your energy is precious, and you're choosing to invest those resources in things that actually matter. The abundance trap tells you that saying no will cost you relationships, that setting boundaries will make you unpopular, that protecting your time will make you seem cold or selfish. But the opposite is true. Saying no to low-value requests allows you to say yes to high-value opportunities. Setting boundaries creates respect, and protecting your time makes you more valuable, not less. The first step out of the availability trap is recognizing that you're in it. You're not exhausted because you're too generous. You're exhausted because you're being exploited, and the exploitation only continues because you're allowing it. The next step is understanding that scarcity creates value, that selectivity creates respect, and that the people worth knowing are the ones who recognize your worth even when you're not constantly proving it to them. Everything changes when you stop treating your availability as an infinite resource that belongs to everyone else. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Need versus Value. You've confused dependency with appreciation, and now you're addicted to being needed. This is the real poison in the availability trap. It's not just that you're exhausted, it's that you've learned to feel valuable when people need you. And now you're unconsciously seeking out situations where you can be needed, even when being needed is destroying you. Think about what happens when someone needs you. There's a feeling, right? A sense of importance. You matter in that moment. You're essential. You're the solution to their problem. It feels good. Your brain releases dopamine. You feel wanted, and so you chase that feeling. You make yourself available so people will need you, so you can feel that rush of being essential again. But needing someone is not the same as valuing someone. That's the fundamental lie you've been living with. A drug addict needs their dealer. That doesn't mean they respect them. A person in crisis needs help. That doesn't mean they value the person who helps them once the crisis passes. Needing someone is about dependency. It's about what you can do for them. It's transactional and temporary and self-interested. Valuing someone is completely different. When you value someone, you respect their time. You think about whether you're imposing. You appreciate their effort. You recognize their sacrifice. You want to reciprocate. You think about their needs and not just your own. The people who need you most are often the ones who respect you least. The person who's constantly in crisis, constantly calling, constantly needing your help, they're not valuing your help. They're using it as a crutch so they don't have to solve their own problems. The colleague who dumps work on you, they're not appreciating your effort. They're taking advantage of the fact that you'll say yes. I made this mistake for years. I had this friend who was always struggling with something, always had a crisis, always needed me to listen, to help, to show up. And I felt valued in those moments. I felt needed. I felt like I mattered. So I kept showing up. And the more I showed up, the worse things got for them. Because I was enabling them to stay stuck instead of pushing them to grow. What I realized eventually was that my availability was a cage for both of us. They got to stay dependent on me instead of building their own capabilities. And I got to feel important without actually creating any real value. We were both stuck in a system that looked like friendship, but was actually exploitation. The psychology here is worth understanding. There's something called the principle of effort justification. Humans value things more when they have to work for them. When you have to invest effort to get something, your brain assigns more value to it. This applies to everything from video games to relationships to advice. But here's the flip side. When something is freely given, easily obtained, available without effort, your brain assigns it less value. So when you're constantly available, when people can access you without difficulty, they unconsciously assign less value to your time. But more than that, they get less satisfaction from the interaction, because the satisfaction comes from the effort, not from the outcome. This is why some of the most appreciative relationships are the ones where access is limited. When someone has to schedule time with you, when they have to wait for your response, when they have to earn your attention, they're investing effort. And that effort creates value in their mind. The conversation matters more. Your advice matters more. Your presence matters more. But when you're instantly available, the effort disappears. And with it goes the sense that the interaction is special or valuable or worth protecting. There's another psychological principle at work here called loss aversion. Humans fear losing something they have more than they desire gaining something they don't have. It's why people hold on to bad relationships, why they stay in jobs they hate, why they keep playing games even when they're losing. The fear of loss is stronger than the desire for gain. But when you're constantly available, people never experience the fear of losing access to you. They never have to worry that you might not be there. So they never develop the appreciation that comes from imagining life without you. It's only when something becomes scarce that people realize how much they value it. Think about this in your own life. The people whose attention you most want, are they the ones who are always accessible? Or are they the ones who are harder to reach? The ones whose opinion you most respect, are they the ones who are constantly offering their thoughts? Or the ones who are selective about what they say? Respect and need move in opposite directions. As need increases, respect decreases. As availability increases, value decreases. This isn't cruelty or ingratitude on other people's part. It's basic human psychology. We are wired to value what's scarce, what's difficult, what we have to work for. And you've been working against this wiring your entire life by making yourself infinitely available. The problem isn't the people who don't appreciate your availability. The problem is the availability itself. You're fighting against fundamental psychology, and psychology always wins. You can't make people respect you by giving more. You can't create appreciation through constant availability. You can't build genuine connection by being available for everything except yourself. What needs to happen is a complete reversal. Instead of trying harder to prove your worth through availability, you need to stop proving anything. You need to recognize that your worth is inherent. It's not something you have to earn by being useful. It's not something that depends on how much others need you. Your time is valuable not because other people say it is. It's valuable because you say it is. Your energy is precious not because others treat it as precious. It's precious because you understand its finite nature. Your attention is a gift not because people appreciate it. It's a gift because you choose to bestow it carefully. When you start believing this, and I mean actually believing it, not just saying it, everything changes. You stop chasing the feeling of being needed. You stop making yourself available to feel important. You stop using other people's dependency as a way to validate your own worth. And something strange happens. People start respecting you more. Not because you're being cold or distant, but because you're finally respecting yourself. And people mirror the value you assign to yourself. You're still here. 2 chapters in, that's not nothing. Most people who clicked this video moved on before they got uncomfortable. You didn't. Which means something in here is hitting close enough to stay. If that's the case, subscribe. Not because this channel needs it, because the next time you want this kind of thinking, you'll want to find it without looking for it. That's all. Back to the part that actually matters. Chapter 3. The magnetic effect of restraint. The people you respect most aren't accessible. That's exactly why you respect them. Notice how this works in your own experience. There's someone in your life whose opinion matters, whose presence commands attention, whose approval you actually care about. Now think about how they behave. They're not constantly available. They're not responding to every message. They're not accommodating every request. They have standards. They have boundaries. They have priorities that come before other people's convenience. And that's precisely what makes them respectable. This is counterintuitive to everything you've been taught. You've been told that being helpful, responsive, and accommodating is the path to success, that saying no is selfish, that being unavailable is rude, that making yourself scarce is playing games. So you've built your entire approach to relationships and work around the opposite principle. Always say yes. Always be available. Always prioritize others. And it's left you invisible. Here's what actually happens when you become selectively unavailable. You enter what psychologists call the focusing illusion. When something is rare or limited, our minds focus on it more intensely. We think about it more. We value it more. We remember it more vividly. When someone is selectively available, every interaction becomes weighted with significance. You know this is true from your own experience. When you finally get time with someone who's hard to reach, that conversation matters. You're present for it. You've been waiting for it. You've prepared for it. It feels earned. Contrast this with someone who's always available. When they talk to you, there's no sense that you're special or chosen. You're simply the current recipient of their unlimited time. The interaction feels less meaningful because it required no sacrifice, no choice, no prioritization. This is the magnetic effect of restraint. When you're selective about your availability, people are drawn to you. Not in a desperate way, but in a way that respects your boundaries. They want access to you more because access is limited. They value your time more because you've made it clear that your time has value. Think about exclusive restaurants. They have waiting lists. They're harder to get into. The food might not be better than cheaper places, but because access is limited, people want it more. They feel special when they get a reservation. They appreciate the experience more. They remember it longer. The scarcity creates the value, not the other way around. Your availability works exactly the same way. When you make yourself scarce, you become more desirable. When you have boundaries, you become more attractive. When you're selective about who gets access to you, people actually want that access more. It sounds backwards, but it's not. It's psychology. There's another mechanism at work here called the endowment effect. When people have to work for something, when they have to wait for it, when they have to earn it, they automatically assign it more value. This isn't rational. It's psychological. The effort invested becomes part of the perceived value. Someone who has to schedule time with you, who has to wait for your response, who has to earn your attention, they're unconsciously inflating the value of that access because of the investment they made. This is why people value advice more when they pay for it than when it's given for free. It's why people stick with difficult hobbies longer than easy ones. It's why winning something feels better than being given something. The effort transforms the experience. When you become unavailable, you force people to invest effort to access you. They have to schedule in advance. They have to think through what they want to say. They have to wait for your response. And with each bit of effort they invest, they unconsciously increase the value they assign to you. Your time becomes more precious. Your attention becomes more meaningful. Your presence becomes more special. But there's something deeper happening too. When you're selective about your availability, you communicate something about yourself that's incredibly powerful. You're saying, I have important things to do. I have meaningful relationships to maintain. I have personal boundaries that I respect. I have a life worth protecting. I have standards. People respond to this message at a subconscious level. They start to mirror the value you place on yourself. If you treat your time as precious, they start to see it as precious. If you respect your own boundaries, they start to respect them too. If you demonstrate that your attention is selective, they start to compete for it. This is the mechanism of magnetic attraction. You're not trying to be attractive. You're just being unavailable. But that unavailability signals that you have something worth being unavailable for. You have standards worth maintaining. You have priorities worth protecting. And people are naturally drawn to those qualities. I saw this happen with someone I knew who went through a major life change. She was always available before, always responding, always helping, always accommodating, and people treated her accordingly. They took her for granted. They took advantage. They didn't respect her time because she'd made it clear that her time didn't have value to her. Then she got focused on a big project. She became less available. She started saying no. And something shifted. People started respecting her more. Not because she was being cold or distant, but because they could see that she was focused on something important. They could sense that her time was spoken for. And suddenly, getting access to her mattered. Her opinion mattered. She became more valuable simply by becoming less accessible. This isn't manipulation. This is just how human psychology works. We value what's scarce. We respect what's protected. We're drawn to people who seem to have something important going on. We want to be part of whatever makes them unavailable to everyone else. The key insight is that scarcity isn't about being difficult or playing games. It's about having genuine priorities, real boundaries, authentic self-respect. When your unavailability stems from the fact that you have important work to do, meaningful relationships to nurture, and personal goals to pursue, it communicates strength, not manipulation. It shows that you have a life worth protecting rather than time to waste. People are naturally attracted to those qualities. They want to be around people who have direction, who have standards, who have meaningful things happening in their lives. They want to be chosen rather than simply accommodated. They want to earn access rather than have it freely given. This is the magnetic quality of selective availability. The more you protect your time, the more people respect it. The more you have boundaries, the more people respect them. The more you have your own priorities, the more people respect you. And the more people respect you, the more they want to be in your life. But none of this happens when you're constantly available. When you're available for everything, you become part of the background. Your presence becomes expected, routine, and therefore invisible. You fade into the psychological wallpaper of other people's lives. The moment you become unavailable, you become visible again. You become something to be pursued rather than something that can be taken for granted. You become magnetic instead of invisible. And that shift changes everything about how people relate to you. Chapter 4. The relationships that survive. The filter setting boundaries doesn't ruin relationships. It reveals which ones were already ruined. This is the part nobody wants to hear. When you stop being constantly available, some relationships will fall away. People will be disappointed. Some will even be angry. And your first instinct will be to go back to your old patterns, to apologize, to make yourself available again, to do whatever it takes to restore the status quo. Don't. The relationships that were built on your over-availability aren't actually relationships. They're transactions. You were providing a service, unlimited time, unlimited energy, unlimited accommodation, and they were taking it. There was no genuine connection there. There was no reciprocity. There was just you giving and them taking until you ran out of things to give. When you set boundaries, these transactional relationships reveal their true nature. The person who only called when they needed something stops calling. The person who expected you to be available for their emergencies suddenly has less emergencies. The person who treated your time like a commodity they could consume without limit gets angry that you're no longer cooperating. Their reaction is information. It's telling you that they valued your availability more than they valued you. They were using you. And now that you're not allowing yourself to be used, they're upset. This is actually a gift. It's clarity. It's the ability to see which relationships were genuine and which ones were just convenient. Most people go their entire lives without this clarity. They maintain relationships out of habit or obligation, never really knowing if the other person actually cares about them or just likes having access to them. But when you set boundaries, the truth comes out fast. The person who gets most upset about your boundaries is usually the one who gave you the least in return. The colleague who dumps work on you but never helps with yours. The friend who calls when they need emotional support but disappears when you need theirs. The family member who expects you to be available for every request but never considers your schedule or priorities. These people aren't angry because they miss you. They're angry because they're losing a resource. Watch what happens to your genuine relationships, though. The people who truly value you will initially be surprised by the change. They might even be a little disappointed. But they'll quickly adapt and respect your new standards. They'll stop expecting immediate responses. They'll start scheduling time with you instead of assuming you're always free. They'll become more intentional about their requests and more appreciative when you say yes. More importantly, these relationships will become deeper and more meaningful. The time you do spend together becomes more valuable. Conversations become more focused and intentional. Shared experiences feel more special because they required coordination and planning. The relationship shifts from convenience-based to choice-based. And choice-based relationships are always stronger. Something else happens too. People start bringing their best selves to interactions with you. When someone knows they have limited access to your attention, they're more likely to make that time count. They'll come prepared for conversations. They'll be more present during your time together. They'll invest more energy in maintaining the relationship because they can't take it for granted. This is the filtering effect of boundaries. The relationships worth keeping survive and actually get better. The relationships that were draining you fade away, and you're left with a social circle that energizes you instead of exhausting you. I watched this happen with someone who finally set boundaries after years of being available to everyone. There was one friendship that seemed to disappear almost immediately. The friend had only called when she needed advice or emotional support. She'd never asked how my acquaintance was doing. She'd never reciprocated. When the boundaries went up, she got angry and eventually drifted away. But the friendships that mattered, the ones where there was actual mutual care, those got stronger. People started scheduling regular time. Conversations became deeper. The relationships felt more balanced because both people were now invested, not just one person giving while the other took. This is what boundary setting actually does. It's not about being cold or rejecting people. It's about being honest about the nature of your relationships and choosing which ones deserve your energy. Something else shifts when you set boundaries, and this is crucial. The power dynamics in your relationships change fundamentally. When you're constantly available, other people control the terms of engagement. They decide when to contact you. They decide what to ask of you. They decide how much of your time to consume. You're essentially giving them permission to run your schedule and determine your priorities. But when you have boundaries, you regain control. You choose when to respond. You choose what requests to accept. You choose how much energy to invest in each relationship. This shift in power dynamics doesn't make you controlling or manipulative. It makes you equal. Healthy relationships require balance, and constant availability creates massive imbalance. When you set boundaries, you're not taking power away from others. You're reclaiming power that should have been yours all along. You're establishing the mutual respect that healthy relationships require. You're saying, my time matters, my energy matters, my priorities matter, and I'm going to protect them. The people who respect you will respect this boundary setting. They'll understand that it comes from self-respect, not rejection. They'll see that you're trying to create healthier, more balanced relationships, and they'll step up to meet that standard. The people who don't respect this will reveal themselves, and you'll get to choose whether to keep them in your life or let them go. This boundary-setting process also reveals your own patterns and preferences. You'll discover which types of requests drain your energy and which ones energize you. You'll learn which people inspire you to be generous with your time and which ones make you feel depleted. You'll identify the activities and commitments that align with your values and the ones that distract from your goals. This self-awareness allows you to become more strategic about your relationships. Instead of saying yes to everything and everyone equally, you can invest your best energy in the relationships that matter most. Instead of being equally available to all, you can prioritize the people who reciprocate your investment. Instead of treating all requests as equally important, you can focus on the ones that align with your priorities. The result is a relationship ecosystem that supports your goals rather than sabotaging them. You'll find yourself surrounded by people who respect your time, appreciate your energy, and contribute positively to your life. The relationships that survive your boundary-setting process will be the ones worth investing in, and the ones that don't survive probably weren't worth maintaining anyway. This is hard to accept at first. There's grief in watching relationships fade. There's guilt in choosing not to accommodate people. There's sadness in realizing that someone you cared about was only using you. But there's also liberation on the other side. You get to rebuild your social and professional life with people who actually respect you. You get to invest your energy in relationships that are reciprocal. You get to be appreciated instead of just being useful. And that's worth everything you lose in the transition. Chapter 5. How successful people stay invisible. Every successful person you know has something in common. They're unreachable to most of the world. This isn't arrogance, it's not rudeness, it's not luck or privilege or having better assistance. It's a deliberate choice that comes from understanding a fundamental truth. Success requires focus, and focus requires the ability to say no to almost everything. Think about the most successful people in any field. The entrepreneurs building billion-dollar companies, the artists creating work that matters, the executives running major organizations, the athletes performing at the highest levels. Are these people constantly available? Do they answer every email? Do they take every meeting? Do they say yes to every opportunity? Never. They've built walls around their time. Not because they don't care about people, but because they understand that their ability to create value depends on sustained focus. And sustained focus is impossible when you're constantly available for interruption. This is what most people don't grasp. They think successful people work harder, that they're more talented, that they have some secret advantage. But the real advantage is much simpler. Successful people protect their time with the same intensity that others protect their money. They understand that time is the only asset that can't be recovered. You can always make more money. You can't make more time. So they become strategically unreachable. Watch how this actually works. Successful entrepreneurs don't answer their own phones. They don't respond to emails immediately. They don't take meetings without clear agendas and defined outcomes. They delegate access management to assistants and gatekeepers. They batch communication into specific time blocks instead of allowing it to interrupt their work throughout the day. This isn't about being difficult. It's about being effective. When you're constantly available, your attention is fragmented across dozens of conversations, requests, and interruptions. You're reactive rather than proactive. You're responding rather than creating. You spend your energy on other people's priorities instead of your own. Successful people flip this entirely. They decide what matters most. They protect time for those priorities. And they say no to everything else. They don't feel guilty about it. They don't apologize for it. They just do it. Because they understand that saying yes to everything means saying no to what matters most. There's another dimension to this that's even more important. Strategic unreachability creates what economists call signaling value. When someone is difficult to reach, it signals that their time is valuable and their attention is in demand. This signal creates a self-reinforcing cycle where perceived value becomes actual value. People assume that if someone is hard to reach, it's because they have important things to do, and many people competing for their attention. This assumption changes how people approach the interaction before it even happens. When someone knows they have limited access to a successful person, they prepare more carefully for the interaction. They think through their questions more thoroughly. They make their communications more concise and focused. They bring their best ideas and most important concerns. The result is that successful people have higher quality interactions. The conversations they do have are more substantive, more focused, and more valuable. They're not drowning in shallow communications because their strategic unreachability filters out everything except what's truly important. I saw this happen when someone I knew started a company. In the beginning, she was available to everyone. She'd take calls from anyone. She'd respond to every email. She'd meet with everyone who asked. And she got overwhelmed with low-quality interactions. People would waste her time because they knew her time was freely available. Then she hired an assistant and became strategically unreachable. Suddenly, people had to go through a gatekeeper. They had to explain why they needed her time. They had to be clear about what they wanted, and the quality of her interactions changed completely. The people who actually got meetings with her came prepared. They valued the time. They made it count. Her work improved dramatically because she could finally focus. Strategic unreachability also creates leverage in negotiations and business relationships. When someone is easy to reach and always available, they have little negotiating power. Their accessibility communicates that they need the interaction more than the other party does. But when someone is strategically unreachable, it suggests that they have alternatives and options. It implies that their participation in any interaction is a choice rather than a necessity. This leverage extends beyond formal business situations into every area of life. When you're strategically unreachable, people value your participation more in social situations. They appreciate your presence more in personal relationships. They respect your opinions more in group discussions. Your scarcity creates gravity that draws people towards you rather than taking you for granted. There's also a compound effect here. Each time you maintain boundaries and protect your time, you reinforce your reputation as someone whose attention is valuable. Each time you say no to a low-priority request, you create space for a high-priority opportunity. Each time you delay a response to think through your answer, you provide more value when you do respond. This compound effect builds over time into what we might call selective magnetism. People begin to compete for your attention rather than expecting it freely. They start to offer value before making requests. They become more strategic about when and how they approach you. Your strategic unreachability trains others to bring their best to every interaction. But here's what's interesting. Successful people don't seem busier than everyone else. They actually seem to have more time. They're calmer. They're more focused. They're more present in the moments they do engage. This isn't because they have less to do. It's because they're doing less of what doesn't matter. Most people fill their days with reactive work, responding to emails, attending unnecessary meetings, saying yes to requests that don't align with their goals. They're busy, but they're not productive. They're working hard, but they're not moving forward. They're available to everyone, but they're effective for no one. Successful people do the opposite. They protect large blocks of time for deep work. They say no to most opportunities so they can say yes to the best ones. They're selective about their availability because they understand that availability determines focus, and focus determines results. This is why the most successful people often seem to have more time rather than less. They're not busier. They're more focused. They're not working harder. They're working more selectively. They're not more available. They're more strategic about when and how they make themselves available. Their success gives them the luxury of choice, and they use that luxury to protect the very focus that created their success in the first place. It's a self-reinforcing cycle. Strategic unreachability creates focus. Focus creates results. Results create more opportunities. And more opportunities require even more strategic unreachability to maintain the focus that produces the results. The key insight is that success isn't just about working harder or being more talented. It's about being more selective about where you direct your energy and attention. Successful people aren't necessarily better at everything. They're better at choosing what to focus on and what to ignore. And that choice starts with becoming strategically unreachable. Chapter 6. The internal shift nobody talks about. Your worth isn't determined by how much you give. It's determined by how much you value what you have to give. This is the internal shift that has to happen before any behavioral change will stick. You can learn all the strategies for setting boundaries. You can master the art of saying no. You can become strategically unavailable in all the right ways. But if you don't change what you believe about your own worth, you'll abandon all of it the first time someone makes you feel guilty. The problem is that most people who struggle with over-availability aren't just being nice. They're operating from a deep-seated belief that their value comes from how useful they are to others. They've learned that love is earned through service, that respect comes from accommodation, that their worth is measured by how much they can give before they break. This belief is wrong, and it's destroying you. Think about where this came from. Maybe you learned it as a child. Maybe you were praised for being helpful and criticized for being selfish. Maybe you learned that the way to get attention was to be needed. Maybe you figured out that being useful kept you safe. Or maybe you just absorbed the message that good people sacrifice themselves for others and bad people think about their own needs. Whatever the origin, the result is the same. You've outsourced your self-worth to other people's opinions and reactions. When someone needs you, you feel valuable. When someone appreciates you, you feel worthy. When someone depends on you, you feel important. Your sense of worth rises and falls based on how much others need or want or approve of you. This is emotional slavery. You've made your value dependent on external demand rather than internal recognition. And now you're trapped in a cycle where you have to keep giving to keep feeling worthy. You can't say no because saying no means you're not useful. And if you're not useful, what are you? What? The shift that needs to happen is moving from external validation to internal validation. This means deriving your sense of worth from your own standards, achievements, and values, rather than from other people's approval or need for your services. It means recognizing that your value is inherent, not earned, that you matter because you exist, not because you're useful. This sounds simple. It's not. Because you've spent years building an identity around being the person who's always available, always helpful, always accommodating. You've gotten validation from that identity. You've gotten social approval. You've gotten a sense of purpose. And now you have to let all of that go and find a new source of worth. The first step is recognizing what you've been doing. You've been confusing being needed with being valued. You've been confusing dependency with appreciation. You've been confusing usefulness with importance. These things are not the same. In fact, they're often opposites. When someone needs you constantly, they're not appreciating you. They're using you as a crutch so they don't have to develop their own capabilities. When someone depends on you for everything, they're not respecting you. They're treating you like a resource to be consumed. When someone values your availability more than your actual presence, they don't care about you. They care about what you can do for them. Once you see this clearly, you can't unsee it. You start to notice the patterns. The person who only calls when they need something. The colleague who takes credit for your work. The friend who disappears when you need support, but expects you to drop everything for their problems. The family member who treats your time like it's worthless, but guards their own time jealously. These people don't value you. They value your availability. And there's a massive difference. The second step is developing what psychologists call an internal locus of control. This means recognizing that you are the ultimate authority over your own life. You don't need permission to protect your time. You don't need justification for having priorities. You don't need approval for setting boundaries. Your time belongs to you. Your energy belongs to you. Your life belongs to you. Most over-available people have an external locus of control. They believe that their worth comes from outside themselves, that their value is determined by how others perceive them, that their importance comes from how much others need them. This makes them powerless. Because if your worth comes from outside, then you have to constantly perform to maintain it. You have to keep giving, keep accommodating, keep sacrificing. Because the moment you stop, you lose your value. But when you have an internal locus of control, you recognize that your worth is self-determined. You decide what matters. You decide how to spend your time. You decide what you're willing to give and what you're not. Other people's opinions and reactions matter less because your value doesn't depend on them. This shift is profoundly liberating. It means you can say no without guilt. It means you can protect your time without apologizing. It means you can have standards without feeling selfish. Because your worth isn't on the line every time someone makes a request. You're not trying to prove anything. You're just being honest about your limits and priorities. The third step is redefining what it means to be helpful. Most over-available people believe that being helpful means saying yes to every request and being accessible at all times. But true helpfulness often requires saying no to immediate requests, so you can say yes to bigger opportunities. It means being strategically available so that when you are available, you can give your best, rather than your leftovers. Think about it this way. When you're constantly available, you're often helping people with things they could figure out themselves. You're enabling learned helplessness rather than fostering independence. You're providing immediate solutions rather than teaching problem-solving skills. Your constant availability often makes people weaker, not stronger, because it removes the necessity for them to develop their own capabilities. Strategic unavailability, on the other hand, forces people to become more resourceful, independent, and thoughtful about their requests. When they know they can't immediately access your help, they'll try harder to solve problems themselves first. When they do reach out, they'll have already invested effort in understanding the problem, which makes your help more effective and their learning more complete. So being less available is actually more helpful in the long run. It builds capability instead of dependency. It creates strength instead of weakness. It fosters growth instead of stagnation. The fourth step is embracing what might feel like selfishness, but is actually self-respect. You need to become comfortable with prioritizing your own goals, protecting your own time, and valuing your own energy. This isn't selfishness. It's self-stewardship. You can't give from an empty well, and you can't help others effectively if you haven't taken care of yourself first. This self-respect communicates itself to others at a subconscious level. When you demonstrate that you value your time, others begin to value it too. When you show that you have standards and boundaries, others begin to respect those standards and boundaries. When you prove that you won't sacrifice your priorities for their convenience, they stop expecting you to do so. People mirror the value you assign to yourself. If you treat your time as worthless, they'll treat it as worthless. If you treat your energy as unlimited, they'll consume it without thought. If you treat your boundaries as flexible, they'll push against them constantly. But if you treat yourself with respect, they'll follow your lead. The final aspect of this internal shift is changing your relationship with guilt. Over-available people feel guilty when they can't immediately help someone or when they have to say no to a request. This guilt is based on the false belief that other people's needs should always come before your own priorities. But you're not responsible for solving everyone's problems. You're not responsible for managing everyone's emotions. You're not responsible for being available for everyone's convenience. Learning to tolerate guilt without immediately acting to relieve it is crucial. The guilt will fade as you realize that people are more capable and resilient than you assumed. They can wait for your response. They can find alternative solutions. They can respect your boundaries without falling apart. This internal shift from external validation to internal validation is the hardest part of the transformation. But it's also the most important. Without this change, any behavioral modifications will feel artificial and unsustainable. You'll be white-knuckling your way through boundary setting, feeling guilty the whole time, waiting for permission to go back to your old patterns. But with this shift in place, strategic unavailability becomes natural. It becomes authentic. It becomes powerful. You're not pretending to value your time. You actually value it. You're not forcing yourself to say no. You're naturally selective about what deserves your yes. You're not performing self-respect. You actually respect yourself. And that changes everything. Chapter 7. The power of a clean no is a complete sentence. But we've been taught it's a starting point for negotiation. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to set boundaries. They say no, but then they immediately undermine it. They apologize. They over-explain. They offer elaborate justifications. They leave the door open for debate. And by the time they're done talking, their no has become maybe, which becomes yes if you push hard enough. Watch how most people say no. I'm sorry, but I can't help you move this weekend because I have this thing I need to do. And I know it might seem selfish, but I really need some time for myself. And I hope you understand. But if you really need me, I guess I could try to rearrange things. That's not a no. That's an invitation to negotiate. Every apology, every justification, Every hedge is telling the other person that your decision is flexible, that your priorities might be wrong, that if they apply enough pressure or make you feel guilty enough, you'll change your mind. A clean no sounds completely different. I won't be able to help you move this weekend. Period. End of discussion. No apology, no explanation, no negotiation. The power in this approach comes from its finality. You're not asking permission to have other priorities. You're not seeking approval for your decision. You're not inviting debate about whether your reasoning is valid. You're stating a fact. This is what's happening. And then you stop talking. This feels uncomfortable at first. You want to fill the silence. You want to soften the blow. You want to make sure the other person doesn't think you're being rude or uncaring. But every word you add after the no weakens your boundary. It signals that you're uncertain, that you feel guilty, that you might be persuaded. The biggest mistake people make is apologizing for things that don't require apologies. You don't need to apologize for having other commitments. You don't need to apologize for needing rest. You don't need to apologize for having financial limitations or time constraints or personal boundaries. These are normal human limitations, not character flaws that require forgiveness. When you apologize for normal boundaries, you're training people to expect that you feel guilty about having limits, which makes them more likely to push against those limits in the future. They learn that if they apply enough pressure or make you feel guilty enough, you'll override your own needs to accommodate them. Instead of apologizing, you acknowledge their request and politely decline. I understand you need help with your project, but I'm not available to assist. This acknowledges that you heard them without suggesting that your unavailability is somehow wrong or unfortunate. It treats your boundaries as legitimate without implying that they're flexible or negotiable. Another critical aspect of effective refusal is timing. The faster you say no to requests that don't align with your priorities, the easier it becomes for everyone involved. When you delay saying no because you're hoping to find a way to say yes, or because you're afraid of disappointing someone, you create more problems than you solve. The person making the request continues planning around your potential participation, which makes your eventual refusal more disruptive and disappointing. They've already invested hope and expectation. They've already started building their plans around you. And now you're pulling the rug out from under them. Fast no's are kind no's. They give people time to find alternative solutions, make different plans, or adjust their expectations. They prevent the buildup of hope and expectation that makes eventual disappointment more painful. They also prevent you from spending mental energy on requests that you know you're going to decline anyway. The key to delivering fast no's is checking requests against your priorities immediately, rather than promising to think about it when you already know the answer. If someone asks you to take on a commitment that you don't have time for, don't want to do, or can't afford, say no immediately. Don't say you'll get back to them unless you genuinely need time to check your calendar or consider the implications. You also need to resist the urge to soften your refusal with false hope or alternative offers. Don't say, "I can't do this, but maybe I could do something else," unless you actually want to do something else. Don't suggest that you might be available in the future, unless you actually expect your situation to change. These hedges weaken your boundaries and create ongoing expectations that will require future no's. There will be times when people respond poorly to your refusal. They might get angry, disappointed, or pushy. They might accuse you of being selfish, unreasonable, or unhelpful. When this happens, remember that their reaction is information about their character, not about the validity of your boundaries. People who respect you will accept your no gracefully, even if they're disappointed. They might say, "That's unfortunate, but I understand," or "No problem, I'll figure something else out. They'll respect your decision without making you feel guilty about it. They'll treat your boundary as legitimate even if it's inconvenient for them. People who don't respect you will try to argue with, guilt trip, or manipulate you into changing your mind. They'll tell you that you're being selfish. They'll remind you of times they helped you. They'll make their needs sound more urgent or dramatic. They'll suggest that a good person would say yes. They'll do whatever it takes to make you feel bad enough about your boundary that you'll abandon it. These negative reactions are actually valuable because they help you identify the people in your life who see you as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected. When someone can't accept your boundaries, they're revealing that they don't respect your autonomy, your judgment, or your right to make decisions about your own time and energy. The goal isn't to avoid all negative reactions to your boundaries. The goal is to maintain your boundaries regardless of how others react. You can acknowledge their disappointment without changing your decision. You can empathize with their situation without taking responsibility for solving it. You can remain kind and respectful while staying firm in your position. Here's what this looks like in practice. Someone pushes back on your no. They say, "But I really need your help with this." You respond, "I understand, and I hope you find a solution." That's it. No apology. No further explanation. No negotiation. You've acknowledged their need without taking responsibility for meeting it. If they escalate, if they try to make you feel guilty or suggest that you're being unreasonable, you simply repeat your position. "I won't be able to help with this." And then you stop engaging. You don't defend yourself. You don't justify your decision. You don't allow yourself to be drawn into a debate about your priorities or your character. This takes practice. Your instinct will be to explain, to justify, to apologize, to make it better. But every time you resist that instinct and deliver a clean no instead, you strengthen your boundary-setting muscles. You teach people that your no means no. You build a reputation as someone whose boundaries are real. Over time, something interesting happens. People stop asking for things they know you'll say no to. They stop testing your boundaries because they've learned those boundaries are solid. They become more thoughtful about when and how they make requests because they know you're selective about what you accept. And the requests you do say yes to become more meaningful. When people know your yes isn't automatic, when they know you're selective about your commitments, your agreement actually means something. It signals that you've evaluated their request and deemed it worthy of your time. That matters in a way that an automatic yes never could. Mastering the art of saying no without guilt or explanation is liberating in ways that extend far beyond the specific requests you decline. It builds confidence in your own judgment. It strengthens your sense of personal authority. It creates space for the opportunities and relationships that truly matter to you. Most importantly, it teaches others that your boundaries are real, which makes them less likely to test those boundaries in the future. And that makes everything easier. Chapter 8. The pushback you'll face and how it reveals everything. When you set boundaries, the people who get angry aren't angry about the boundary. They're angry about losing their resource. This is the filter that separates the people who actually care about you from the people who were just using you. And it's going to be uncomfortable. Because some of the people who fail this test are going to be people you thought cared about you. People you've invested years in. People you considered close friends or important family members. When you start implementing boundaries and becoming less available, you're going to face resistance. This isn't optional. It's not something you can avoid through better communication or gentler boundary setting. The people who have grown accustomed to unlimited access to your time, energy, and resources will not give up that access without a fight. The first type of pushback you'll encounter is emotional manipulation. People will try to make you feel guilty for having boundaries. They'll tell you that you've changed, that you're not the person you used to be, that you're becoming selfish or cold. They'll remind you of times when they helped you. They'll suggest that you owe them your availability. They'll imply that good people don't have the kinds of boundaries you're setting. This manipulation works because it targets your deepest insecurities about setting boundaries. You already feel guilty about saying no, and they know exactly how to amplify that guilt. They'll use phrases like, "I can't believe you won't help me," or "You never used to be like this," or "I thought I could count on you." These statements are designed to make you feel like a bad person for having normal human limitations. They're trying to make you so uncomfortable with your boundary that you'll abandon it to relieve the emotional discomfort. The key to handling emotional manipulation is recognizing it for what it is: an attempt to control your behavior through induced guilt and shame. When someone tries to manipulate you emotionally, they're not actually addressing the substance of your boundary. They're trying to make you feel so bad about having the boundary that you'll give it up. Your response should be calm, brief, and non-defensive. Don't try to justify your boundaries or prove that you're still a good person. Simply restate your position and refuse to engage with the manipulation. "I understand you're disappointed, but my decision stands." That's it. Don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't allow yourself to be drawn into a debate about your character or your priorities. The manipulation only works if you engage with it. If you take the bait and start defending yourself, you've already lost. The second type of pushback is escalation. When gentle manipulation doesn't work, some people will increase the pressure. They'll make their requests more urgent, their needs more dramatic, their emotional appeals more intense. They might claim that their situation is an emergency, that you're the only person who can help them, that terrible consequences will result if you don't make yourself available. Escalation is a test of your boundary strength. The person is essentially asking, how much pressure does it take to get you to abandon your boundaries? If you give in to escalation, you're teaching them that boundaries are negotiable and that enough pressure will always overcome your limits. This encourages more escalation in the future and makes your boundaries effectively meaningless. The way to handle escalation is to remain calm and consistent, regardless of how dramatic the pressure becomes. Don't match their emotional intensity. Don't get drawn into arguments about the urgency or importance of their request. And don't feel obligated to solve problems that escalate after you've already declined to be involved. Your boundaries don't become invalid just because someone's situation becomes more dramatic. If anything, the escalation is proof that they're trying to manipulate you into compliance. Real emergencies don't require manipulation. They require direct, honest requests for help. The third type of pushback is testing. Some people will probe your boundaries to see if they're real or just temporary. They'll make small requests that technically violate your boundaries but seem harmless or reasonable. They'll push deadlines, exceed agreed-upon limits, ask for just this once exceptions. This testing behavior is designed to erode your boundaries gradually rather than challenging them directly. And it's particularly dangerous because each individual request seems reasonable in the moment. Can you just look at this quick email? Can we push our meeting by 15 minutes? Can you help with just this one small thing? But the cumulative effect is the complete erosion of your boundaries. If you allow testing behavior to succeed, you're communicating that your boundaries are guidelines rather than rules. And guidelines can always be negotiated or ignored. The way to handle testing is to enforce your boundaries consistently, even when violations seem minor or well-intentioned. This doesn't mean being harsh or punitive. It means being clear and consistent. If someone exceeds the response time you've established for emails, don't respond immediately just because they claim it's urgent. If someone asks for a small favor after you've established that you're not available for favors, decline just as clearly as you would decline a large request. Every time you make an exception, you're teaching people that your boundaries are flexible, that if they push just right, if they make it seem small enough, if they catch you at the right moment, you'll give in. And once they learn that, the testing never stops. The fourth type of pushback is replacement pressure. When you become less available to someone, they might try to make you feel responsible for finding alternative solutions to their needs. They'll ask you to recommend someone else who can help them, to connect them with resources, to provide solutions even if you can't provide direct assistance. This might seem reasonable, but it's often an attempt to maintain access to your time and mental energy even after you've declined to provide direct help. The key insight is that setting boundaries means you're not responsible for managing the consequences of those boundaries for other people. If someone needs help that you can't or won't provide, finding alternative solutions is their responsibility, not yours. You can choose to offer suggestions or connections if you want to, but you're not obligated to do so. And you shouldn't feel guilty if you don't. I saw this pattern play out repeatedly with someone who finally started setting boundaries at work. Colleagues who had been dumping projects on her for years started pushing back when she said no. Some tried guilt, some tried escalation, some tried to make their requests seem smaller or more urgent. And when all of that failed, they'd ask her to at least point them to someone else who could help or to give them guidance on how to proceed. She realized that even these seemingly reasonable requests were attempts to keep consuming her time and energy. They wanted her to do the work of finding solutions, even if she wasn't doing the actual work. So she started saying, "I'm sure you'll figure it out," and leaving it at that. And guess what happened? They figured it out. They always could have. They just didn't have to as long as she was available. The final type of pushback is relationship threats. Some people will threaten to end or diminish the relationship if you don't return to your previous availability patterns. They'll say things like, "I guess our friendship doesn't mean as much to you as I thought." Or, "If you can't be there for me, I don't know why we're even friends." These threats are designed to make you choose between your boundaries and your relationships. And here's what you need to understand. If someone is willing to end a relationship because you have boundaries, they weren't valuing the relationship itself. They were valuing what they could get from the relationship. This is painful to recognize, but it's also liberating. You're better off knowing where you stand than continuing a one-sided relationship that was never genuine. The relationship threat reveals the truth. This person saw you as a resource, not as a person. They wanted access to your time and energy, not connection with you as a human being. When someone makes a relationship threat, call their bluff. Not aggressively, not defensively, just calmly. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I value our relationship, but I also need to maintain boundaries that work for me." And then let them decide what they want to do. If they actually end the relationship over your boundaries, they've done you a favor. They've shown you exactly who they were. The most important thing to remember about pushback is that it's temporary. People will test your new boundaries, but if you remain consistent, they'll eventually accept the new reality. The relationships that survive your boundary-setting process will be stronger and more genuine than the ones that don't. And the respect you gain from standing firm will more than compensate for any temporary discomfort you experience during the transition. The pushback isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something right. You're disrupting a system that was working in other people's favor. You're refusing to be exploited. You're demanding respect. Of course, they're going to push back, but their pushback doesn't make your boundaries invalid. It makes them necessary. Chapter 9. Advanced Accessibility Architecture. You don't get less accessible by disappearing. You get more valuable by being strategic about when you show up. Once you understand the principles of strategic unavailability and have begun setting basic boundaries, it's time to implement more sophisticated strategies for managing your accessibility. These aren't tricks or games. They're systems that successful people use to protect their time while still maintaining the relationships and opportunities that matter. The first strategy is time-blocking communication. Instead of responding to messages throughout the day as they arrive, you designate specific time periods for checking and responding to emails, texts, and calls. This might mean checking email only at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 5 p.m., or setting aside 1 hour in the morning for returning calls. During your non-communication blocks, you resist the urge to check messages or respond to notifications. This serves multiple purposes. It protects your focused work time from constant interruption. It batches similar tasks together for increased efficiency, and it trains others that immediate responses aren't available or necessary. When people know you don't respond to messages immediately, they stop expecting immediate responses, which reduces pressure on both sides of the interaction. To implement time blocking effectively, you need to communicate your communication schedule to the important people in your life. Let colleagues know that you check email 3 times daily and that urgent matters should be communicated through a different channel. Tell friends that you typically respond to texts in the evening rather than throughout the day. Set up an autoresponder that lets people know when they can expect a response and what constitutes a true emergency. The second strategy is differential availability. Not all relationships are equal. Your most important relationships deserve more accessibility than casual acquaintances. Your romantic partner, close family members, and key business relationships should have more access to you than random acquaintances, casual friends, or people who only contact you when they need something. This means being more accessible to some people than others, based on the value and nature of your relationships. High-priority people might have your phone number and can expect same-day responses. Medium-priority people might have email access with 24 to 48-hour response times. Low-priority people might only have access through social media or professional platforms with even longer response windows. To implement this, create categories for your relationships and establish different communication protocols for each. This isn't about being elitist or cold. It's about recognizing that your time and attention are finite resources that should be allocated strategically. The people who invest in you deserve more of your investment than the people who only take. The third strategy is scheduled accessibility. Instead of being randomly available whenever someone wants your time, you create specific periods when you're accessible for meetings, calls, or extended conversations. This might mean designating Tuesday and Thursday mornings for meetings, Monday evenings for catching up with friends, or Sunday afternoons for family time. Scheduled accessibility forces people to plan ahead if they want access to your time, which makes them more intentional about how they use that time. It also gives you control over when interactions happen, allowing you to group similar activities together and protect your most productive hours for focused work. When implementing scheduled accessibility, be specific about the types of interactions that fit into each scheduled period. Office hours might be for work-related discussions. Social time might be for casual conversations. Family time might be protected from outside interruptions. Having clear purposes for each accessibility window helps people understand how to use your time appropriately. The fourth strategy is value-based filtering. Before saying yes to any significant request, you evaluate it based on alignment with your goals, values, and priorities. You ask yourself, does this opportunity move me closer to my goals? Does it align with my values? Is it worth the time and energy investment? If the answer to these questions isn't a clear yes, the answer to the request is no. Value-based filtering requires you to be clear about your own priorities and goals. If you don't know what you're trying to achieve or what matters most to you, you can't effectively filter opportunities based on value. Take time to define your short-term and long-term objectives. Identify your core values. Clarify what success looks like in different areas of your life. Then use those criteria as filters for every request that comes your way. The fifth strategy is graduated responses. Not all communications deserve the same level of attention. Simple yes or no questions might get immediate brief responses. Complex discussions might be scheduled for dedicated time. Non-urgent requests might be bundled together for batch processing. Graduated responses allow you to be selectively responsive without being completely unresponsive. People get the level of attention their requests deserve, which feels fair and reasonable while still protecting your time and energy. Emergency situations get immediate attention. Important matters get timely responses, and routine communications get appropriate but not excessive attention. The sixth strategy is attention currency. Start thinking of your attention as a valuable currency that should be spent deliberately rather than freely given away. When someone asks for your time or energy, consider what you're getting in return. Are they offering value, reciprocity, or mutual benefit? Or are they simply expecting you to give without receiving anything meaningful in return? This doesn't mean every interaction should be transactional, but it does mean being aware of the balance in your relationships and communications. People who consistently ask without giving, who drain your energy without providing value, or who expect unlimited access without respecting your boundaries, are poor investments of your attention currency. I started applying this when I noticed certain people in my life only reached out when they needed something. The requests were always framed as urgent or important, but when I needed something, they were nowhere to be found. Once I started viewing my attention as currency and tracking the balance of these relationships, the pattern became obvious. I was overpaying for relationships that were giving me nothing in return. The final strategy is strategic presence. When you do make yourself available, be fully present and engaged. Put away distractions. Give your complete attention. Make the interaction valuable for both parties. This quality over quantity approach makes your limited availability more impactful and satisfying. Strategic presence ensures that when people do get access to your time, they have a positive experience that justifies the effort required to obtain that access. It reinforces the value of your attention and makes people more respectful of your boundaries because they understand that your availability, while limited, is high quality and worthwhile. This is the opposite of what most people do. Most people are physically present but mentally absent. They're in meetings but checking their phones. They're with friends but thinking about work. They're available constantly but present rarely. This creates interactions that feel hollow and unsatisfying for everyone involved. When you're strategically unavailable most of the time but fully present when you are available, you create interactions that actually matter. People leave conversations with you feeling heard, valued, and energized. They're more likely to respect your boundaries because they know that when you do show up, you really show up. These strategies work together to create what we might call accessibility architecture. You're not just randomly saying no to things. You're building a system that protects your time, prioritizes what matters, and makes your availability valuable. You're creating structure around when, how, and to whom you're accessible. This architecture takes time to build and refine. You'll make mistakes. You'll have to adjust. You'll discover what works for your specific situation and what doesn't. But the goal is to move from reactive availability, where you respond to whatever comes your way, to strategic availability, where you control when, where, and how you engage with others. The result is a life where you're no longer constantly interrupted, constantly drained, constantly responding to other people's priorities. Instead, you're focused, energized, and in control of your time and attention. You're valuable because you're selective, and you're respected because you respect yourself. Chapter 10. The career transformation nobody expected. The person who says yes to everything gets the overflow. The person who says no strategically gets the opportunities. This is the career insight that changes everything. But most people never discover it because they're too busy being helpful. They think that saying yes to every request, attending every meeting, and making themselves constantly available demonstrates dedication and commitment. They believe this is the path to advancement and recognition. It's not. It's the path to being useful but not valuable, to being busy but not successful, to being needed for grunt work but never considered for leadership. Your career success is directly linked to how you manage your professional availability. The way you respond to requests, manage your time, and set boundaries at work determines not just your productivity, but your perceived value, advancement opportunities, and overall professional trajectory. The biggest mistake most professionals make is confusing being busy with being productive, and confusing being available with being valuable. They answer every email immediately. They say yes to every meeting request. They make themselves constantly accessible to colleagues and supervisors. They think this demonstrates dedication. But what it actually demonstrates is poor prioritization, lack of boundaries, and an inability to distinguish between urgent and important tasks. Think about the most successful people in your industry or organization. Are they the ones who respond to emails at midnight? Who attend every possible meeting? Who make themselves available for every request? Or are they the ones who are selective about their commitments, strategic about their time allocation, and protective of their focus? The answer reveals a fundamental truth about professional success. Value comes from the results you create, not from the time you spend being accessible. When you're constantly available at work, you become what organizational psychologists call a go-to person for all the wrong reasons. Instead of being sought out for your expertise, judgment, or strategic thinking, you become the default option for tasks that others don't want to handle. You get the overflow work, the last-minute requests, the time-consuming projects that don't advance your career. Your availability makes you useful, but it doesn't make you valuable. Strategic unavailability in your career begins with understanding the difference between reactive and proactive work. Reactive work responds to other people's priorities, deadlines, and emergencies. Proactive work advances your own goals, develops your skills, and creates value for your organization. When you're constantly available, your day fills up with reactive work. There's no time left for the proactive activities that actually drive career advancement. The most successful professionals protect significant portions of their time for proactive work. They block calendar time for strategic thinking, skill development, and project advancement. They don't allow these blocks to be interrupted by non-urgent requests or meetings that could be emails. This protection of proactive time requires you to become comfortable with delayed responses and strategic inaccessibility. When someone sends you a non-urgent email, you don't need to respond within the hour. When someone wants to schedule a meeting that doesn't align with your priorities, you don't need to immediately accommodate their preferred time. When someone has a problem that isn't actually your responsibility, you don't need to drop everything to help solve it. Setting these boundaries at work will initially create some resistance. Colleagues who are accustomed to immediate access to your time will push back when that access becomes limited. Supervisors who have relied on your constant availability might question your commitment or dedication, but this resistance is temporary, and it's far outweighed by the respect and influence you gain from demonstrating that your time has value. I watched someone implement this at a company where she'd been the go-to person for years. She was drowning in other people's requests while her own projects languished. Her career had stalled because she was too busy being helpful to be strategic. She started protecting her mornings for focused work. No meetings before 11 a.m. No checking email before 10 a.m. Just deep work on her most important projects. People were annoyed at first, but within 3 months, the quality of her work had improved dramatically. She was delivering better results. She was more visible to leadership, and she got promoted 6 months later. The promotion didn't come from being more available. It came from being more effective, from producing better work, from demonstrating that she could prioritize and execute on what mattered most. One of the most powerful career applications of strategic unavailability is in meeting management. Most professionals attend far too many meetings, most of which are poorly planned, inefficiently run, and ultimately unproductive. When you become selective about which meetings you attend, you're not just protecting your time. You're signaling that your presence has value and that you're strategic about how you invest your energy. Before accepting any meeting request, ask 3 questions. Is my presence essential to the meeting's success? Will this meeting advance my goals or the organization's priorities? Is this the best use of my time compared to other available options? If you can't answer yes to at least 2 of these questions, decline the meeting or delegate your attendance to someone else. When you do attend meetings, make your presence count. Come prepared. Contribute meaningfully. Help drive the discussion toward actionable outcomes. This quality over quantity approach makes people more thoughtful about when they include you in meetings, because they know you'll add value when you're there. Strategic unavailability also applies to how you handle requests and assignments. When someone asks you to take on additional work, don't automatically say yes. Instead, ask about priorities, deadlines, and resource allocation. If taking on the new work would compromise your existing commitments or prevent you from focusing on high-impact activities, negotiate alternatives or decline the request. This doesn't mean being uncooperative or unhelpful. It means being strategic about how you deploy your skills and energy. When you're selective about the projects you take on, you can invest more thoroughly in the ones you accept, delivering higher quality results that enhance your reputation and advance your career. The key insight is that career advancement comes from being known for excellence in specific areas, not from being available for everything. When you spread yourself too thin by saying yes to every request, you become a generalist who's competent at many things, but exceptional at nothing. When you focus your energy strategically, you develop deep expertise and strong results in the areas that matter most. This focus requires you to identify your highest value activities and protect time for them ruthlessly. These might include developing new skills, building key relationships, working on strategic projects, or creating innovative solutions to important problems. Whatever they are, they should take priority over routine tasks, administrative work, or requests that don't advance your goals. The transformation in your career that results from strategic unavailability is profound. People start coming to you for more important and interesting work because they know you'll give it the attention it deserves. You're included in higher-level discussions because your input is seen as valuable rather than routine. You have more opportunities for advancement because you have time to pursue them and the reputation to deserve them. Most importantly, you gain control over your professional destiny. Instead of being reactive to whatever comes your way, you're proactive about creating the career you want. Instead of being available for everything, you're strategic about what matters. And instead of being busy without purpose, you're focused with intention. The people who advance fastest aren't the ones who work the longest hours or attend the most meetings or respond to emails most quickly. They're the ones who produce the best results, who demonstrate strategic thinking, who protect their time for what matters most, who understand that being selectively unavailable is a feature of success, not a bug. Your career doesn't improve when you become more available. It improves when you become more strategic about your availability. Chapter 11. Your personal life after boundaries. Genuine friendships are the ones that survive when you stop being convenient. The transformation that occurs in your personal life when you master strategic unavailability is nothing short of revolutionary. Your friendships become deeper and more meaningful. Your romantic relationships become more passionate and respectful. Your family dynamics shift from exploitation to appreciation, and perhaps most importantly, you reclaim your personal time and energy for the activities, goals, and relationships that truly matter to you. Let's start with friendships, because this is where the change is often most dramatic and revealing. When you stop being constantly available to friends, you quickly discover which friendships were built on genuine connection and which were built on convenience. The friends who only contacted you when they needed something, who expected you to be available for their drama but were never there for your important moments, who took your time and energy for granted, they'll often fade away when you set boundaries. This isn't a loss, it's a liberation. These weren't real friendships anyway. They were one-sided relationships where you were providing emotional labor, practical help, and constant availability in exchange for the illusion of connection. When you stop providing unlimited access to your time and energy, these pseudo-friends reveal their true nature by disappearing or becoming hostile about your new boundaries. But the friends who truly value you will respond differently. They'll initially be surprised by your new boundaries, but they'll quickly adapt and respect them. They'll stop expecting immediate responses to every text. They'll start planning social activities in advance instead of assuming you're always free. They'll become more intentional about your time together and more appreciative when you do spend time with them. More importantly, these genuine friendships will become deeper and more satisfying. When you're not constantly available, the time you do spend with friends becomes more precious and focused. Instead of scattered, interrupted conversations, you'll have meaningful exchanges. Instead of being the default option for every social activity, you'll be chosen for experiences that matter. Instead of feeling drained by one-sided relationships, you'll feel energized by mutual appreciation and respect. Strategic unavailability also transforms your romantic relationships in profound ways. If you're single, it makes you far more attractive to potential partners. People are naturally drawn to those who seem to have rich, full lives that can't be easily accessed or controlled. When you're not constantly available, you communicate that you have standards, priorities, and a sense of self-worth that goes beyond any individual relationship. This creates what psychologists call pre-selection value. When someone has to work to get your attention, when they have to earn your time, when they have to compete with your other priorities, they automatically assign more value to the relationship. You become a prize to be won rather than a resource to be consumed. The effort required to access you becomes part of your appeal. If you're already in a relationship, strategic unavailability can revitalize dynamics that may have become stagnant or taken for granted. When you stop being constantly available to your partner, when you maintain your own interests and friendships, when you preserve time for your personal goals, you become more interesting and attractive. You bring fresh energy and experiences to the relationship. This doesn't mean being distant or unavailable to your partner. It means maintaining the individual identity and personal boundaries that made you attractive in the first place. It means not dropping everything for every request, not sacrificing all your personal time for couple time, not losing yourself in the relationship. Paradoxically, this strategic unavailability often makes partners more attentive, appreciative, and invested in the relationship. When you're always available, your presence becomes routine. When you maintain your own life, you become interesting again. Family relationships are often where strategic unavailability faces the strongest resistance, because family members are the most likely to feel entitled to unlimited access to your time and energy. They'll use guilt, obligation, and emotional manipulation to try to maintain their previous level of access to your availability. They'll remind you of family loyalty, childhood dynamics, or past favors to try to override your new boundaries. But family boundaries are often the most important ones to establish, because family relationships can be the most draining and exploitative if left unchecked. The family member who calls every day with drama, who expects you to drop everything for their emergencies, who guilt-trips you into saying yes to every request, can consume enormous amounts of your time and energy if you let them. When you set boundaries with family members, you're not rejecting the relationship. You're making it healthier and more sustainable. You're teaching them that you're a person with your own life, priorities, and limitations, not just a resource for their convenience. The family members who truly care about you will ultimately respect these boundaries, even if they initially resist them. Strategic unavailability also transforms your relationship with yourself and your personal time. When you stop giving your time away indiscriminately, you suddenly have space for the activities, interests, and goals that make life meaningful. You can pursue hobbies that energize you, work on projects that matter to you, invest in personal growth that makes you more interesting and capable. This reclaimed time often reveals interests and capabilities that were dormant while you were constantly available to others. You might discover artistic talents, intellectual curiosities, or physical capabilities that were buried under layers of other people's demands. You might reconnect with dreams and goals that were forgotten in the chaos of constant availability. The personal transformation that results from strategic unavailability creates a positive feedback loop. As you become more interesting, capable, and self-directed, you become more attractive to others. As you demonstrate self-respect and personal boundaries, others begin to treat you with more respect. As you invest in your own growth and goals, you become someone worth knowing and spending time with. This transformation also changes how you view and approach new relationships. Instead of desperately seeking approval and validation from others, you become selective about who you allow into your life. Instead of saying yes to every social opportunity, you choose the activities and people that align with your values and goals. Instead of being needy and available, you become choosy and valuable. The ultimate result is a personal life that reflects your priorities, supports your goals, and energizes you, rather than draining you. Your relationships become sources of mutual enrichment, rather than one-sided exploitation. Your time becomes your own to invest in what matters most to you, and your sense of self-worth becomes internally generated rather than dependent on other people's approval or need for your services. This personal transformation is perhaps the most rewarding aspect of mastering strategic unavailability because it affects every area of your life. When your personal relationships are healthy and your personal time is protected, you have the foundation you need to succeed in every other area. You're not constantly exhausted from managing other people's emotions. You're not constantly resentful from giving more than you receive. You're not constantly anxious about disappointing people. You're energized, fulfilled, and in control of your own life. And that changes everything. Chapter 12. The Compound Effect, where the magic really happens. Time is the only investment that compounds, but you have to stop giving it away first. The benefits of strategic unavailability don't just add up. They multiply. Every boundary you maintain, every no you deliver, every moment you protect your time and energy creates compound returns that grow exponentially over time. This compound effect is why some people seem to accomplish extraordinary things, while others, despite working just as hard, struggle to make meaningful progress toward their goals. Think of your time and energy as investment capital. When you're constantly available, you're essentially giving away this capital for free with no expectation of return. You're making countless micro-investments in other people's priorities, emergencies, and convenience, but you're not accumulating any compound returns for yourself. At the end of each day, week, or year, you have little to show for all the time and energy you've expended. You've been busy, you've been helpful, you've been available, but you haven't built anything that lasts. You haven't developed capabilities that compound. You haven't created value that generates future returns. But when you become strategically unavailable, you start investing your time and energy in activities and relationships that generate returns. You focus on developing skills that increase your capabilities. You invest in relationships that are mutually beneficial. You work on projects that build toward larger goals. Each of these investments generates returns that can be reinvested, creating a compound effect that accelerates your progress. The first area where you'll notice compound returns is in skill development. When you protect time for learning and practice instead of giving it away to constant interruptions and requests, you develop expertise faster and more thoroughly. The skills you build in year 1 become the foundation for more advanced capabilities in year 2. The knowledge you accumulate compounds, making future learning easier and more effective. This compound learning effect is why successful people often seem to acquire new skills and knowledge at an accelerating pace. It's not that they're necessarily smarter or more talented. It's that they've protected their learning time from the constant demands that prevent most people from developing deep expertise in anything. They understand that saying no to immediate requests allows them to say yes to long-term capability building. Each skill they develop makes the next skill easier to acquire. Each concept they master makes related concepts easier to understand. Each hour invested in learning generates returns that make future learning more efficient. The compound effect also applies to relationships and networking. When you're selective about your social and professional interactions, you can invest more deeply in the relationships that matter most. These deeper relationships generate more opportunities, referrals, and collaborations than dozens of shallow connections ever could. The time you save by not maintaining every casual acquaintance can be invested in building stronger bonds with the people who can truly impact your life and career. Quality relationships compound in ways that quantity relationships never can. A single strong relationship can lead to multiple opportunities, introductions to other valuable connections, and ongoing collaboration that generates results for years. But these compound relationship returns only happen when you invest the time and energy needed to build real depth and mutual value. When you're spreading yourself thin across hundreds of superficial connections, you're not building anything that compounds. You're just maintaining a network that provides surface-level benefits, but no real depth or lasting value. Strategic unavailability also creates compound returns in terms of reputation and influence. Each time you demonstrate that your time is valuable, that your attention is selective, and that your commitments are meaningful, you build a reputation for being someone worth knowing and working with. This reputation creates what economists call signaling value, where your perceived worth increases your actual worth. This reputation compounds over time, making it easier to access better opportunities, attract higher quality relationships, and command more respect in your interactions. People begin to compete for your attention, rather than taking it for granted. They bring better opportunities to you rather than expecting you to be grateful for whatever they offer. They treat your input as valuable rather than routine. Each positive interaction reinforces your reputation, which attracts more positive interactions, which further strengthens your reputation. The compound effect is particularly powerful in creative and entrepreneurial endeavors. When you protect large blocks of uninterrupted time for deep work, you can tackle complex projects that require sustained focus and creativity. These projects often generate disproportionate returns compared to the scattered reactive work that fills most people's days. A single creative project completed during protected time might generate more value than dozens of small tasks completed while constantly interrupted. A business idea developed during focused thinking time might create more wealth than years of reactive busyness. A skill mastered during dedicated practice time might open career opportunities that were previously impossible. This is why the most successful creators, entrepreneurs, and leaders are often obsessive about protecting their time and attention. They understand that their biggest breakthroughs and most valuable contributions come from sustained focus on important projects, not from being constantly available for everyone else's priorities. The compound effect also applies to personal well-being and life satisfaction. When you stop depleting your energy through constant availability and start investing it in activities that energize and fulfill you, you create an upward spiral of well-being. You have more energy for the things that matter to you, which makes you more capable and motivated, which leads to better results and more satisfaction. Contrast this with the downward spiral that results from constant availability. You deplete your energy on other people's priorities, leaving you exhausted and resentful. You make little progress on your own goals, which makes you feel unsuccessful and unfulfilled. You maintain relationships that drain you rather than energize you, which makes you feel isolated despite being constantly busy with social obligations. The compound effect of strategic unavailability takes time to build, which is why many people abandon it before they see the full benefits. The immediate costs are obvious. Some people will be disappointed. Some requests will go unfulfilled. Some opportunities will be missed. But the long-term benefits are exponential. Better relationships, higher achievement, greater satisfaction, more control over your life's direction. Understanding this compound effect is crucial for maintaining strategic unavailability during the difficult transition period. When you're tempted to return to old patterns of constant availability, remember that you're not just choosing between saying yes or no to a single request. You're choosing between two completely different life trajectories, one where your time and energy are constantly dispersed without generating compound returns, and one where they're strategically invested to create exponential improvements in every area of your life. The person who says yes to everything ends up with nothing that compounds. The person who says no strategically ends up with everything that matters. Every hour you protect compounds into skills, relationships, projects, and achievements that generate future returns. Every hour you give away disappears forever with nothing to show for it. Time is the ultimate non-renewable resource. Once it's gone, it's gone. You can't buy more. You can't earn more. You can't recover what you've wasted. The only choice you have is how to invest the time you have. And investment requires saying no to consumption. It requires protecting your capital from those who would spend it without generating returns. It requires being strategic about where you direct your finite resources. The compound effect is the reason why strategic unavailability isn't just a nice idea or a temporary strategy. It's the fundamental principle that separates people who build meaningful lives from people who simply stay busy until they die. Time either compounds into something valuable or it disappears into nothing. The choice is yours. Chapter 13. The mistakes that kill boundary setting. You'll destroy your own boundaries before anyone else gets the chance. Even when people understand the importance of strategic unavailability and commit to setting boundaries, they often make critical mistakes that undermine their efforts. These mistakes are so common and so destructive that they deserve careful examination. Learning to recognize and avoid these pitfalls is essential for successfully transforming your availability patterns and maintaining the boundaries that protect your time and energy. The first major mistake is inconsistent boundary enforcement. People set boundaries with good intentions, but then make exceptions so frequently that the boundaries become meaningless. They say they won't respond to emails after 8 p.m., but then answer just this one urgent message. They establish that Sundays are for personal time, but then agree to just this one small favor. They decide they won't attend unnecessary meetings, but then attend one because it might be important. Each exception you make doesn't just affect that specific situation. It trains people to expect that your boundaries are negotiable. When you enforce a boundary 9 times but make an exception on the 10th, people learn that enough pressure, the right circumstances, or the perfect guilt trip can override your limits. This encourages them to push against your boundaries more aggressively and more frequently. Consistent boundary enforcement requires you to treat your boundaries as rules rather than guidelines. Rules have clear consequences that are applied every time they're violated, regardless of the circumstances or who's involved. Guidelines, on the other hand, are suggestions that can be bent or ignored when it seems convenient or reasonable. Your boundaries are rules. Not because you're rigid or inflexible, but because your time and energy are finite resources that must be protected systematically. Every exception erodes the boundary until it no longer exists. The second mistake is over-explaining your boundaries. When people challenge your boundaries, there's a natural temptation to justify your position with elaborate explanations. You want to help them understand that your boundaries are reasonable, that you're not being arbitrary or selfish, and that you have legitimate reasons for your limits. But over-explanation actually weakens your boundaries by suggesting that they're up for debate. When you explain your boundaries extensively, you're implicitly saying that your boundaries are only valid if the other person agrees with your reasoning. You're making your boundaries dependent on their approval rather than your own judgment. This opens the door for them to argue with your reasoning, challenge your priorities, or pressure you to make exceptions based on their assessment of your situation. Effective boundaries are stated simply and enforced consistently without extensive justification. I don't check emails after 8 p.m. is a boundary. I don't check emails after 8 p.m. because I need time to unwind and spend with my family, and I find that work emails stress me out, and I read that it's important to have work-life balance, and I hope you understand, is an invitation to negotiate. The third mistake is boundary creep, where you gradually allow small violations that eventually erode your boundaries completely. Someone asks you to respond to just one quick email during your protected time. Someone requests just 5 minutes of your attention during your focused work period. Someone wants just a small favor after you've established that you're not available for favors. These small violations seem harmless individually, but they compound into complete boundary collapse. The person who gets 5 minutes of your time will soon want 10 minutes, then 15, then an hour. The one quick email becomes a rapid-fire exchange that consumes your entire evening. The small favor becomes the first in a series of increasingly large requests. Boundary creep is particularly dangerous because it happens gradually, making it easy to rationalize each individual violation as reasonable or harmless. You don't notice that your boundaries have disappeared until you're back to your old patterns of constant availability and energy depletion. The fourth mistake is emotional boundary enforcement. When people violate your boundaries, there's often an emotional reaction. Frustration, anger, resentment, hurt. Some people express these emotions dramatically when enforcing their boundaries, turning every boundary violation into an emotional confrontation. This approach makes boundary enforcement feel like punishment rather than simple limit setting. Emotional boundary enforcement often backfires because it makes the boundary violation seem more significant than the boundary itself. People focus on your emotional reaction rather than the boundary that was violated. They might apologize for making you angry while completely ignoring the fact that they overstepped your clearly stated limits. Effective boundary enforcement is calm, consistent, and matter-of-fact. You're not angry that someone tested your boundary. You're simply maintaining your stated position. You're not punishing them for pushing against your limits. You're just not allowing those limits to be crossed. The boundary enforcement should feel inevitable rather than emotional. The fifth mistake is delayed boundary setting. Many people wait until they're overwhelmed, resentful, or exhausted before setting boundaries. They suffer through months or years of constant availability, hoping that things will improve naturally, before finally deciding that boundaries are necessary. By this time, the patterns of exploitation are deeply established, and the boundary setting feels sudden and dramatic to everyone involved. Late boundary setting is much more difficult than early boundary setting because you're trying to change established patterns rather than preventing problematic patterns from developing. The people who have grown accustomed to unlimited access to your time and energy will resist the change more strongly because they're losing something they've come to expect and depend on. The most effective approach is to set boundaries early and proactively before problems develop. When you start a new job, begin a new relationship, or enter a new social situation, establish your availability patterns and limits from the beginning. This prevents exploitation patterns from developing and makes your boundaries feel natural rather than reactive. The sixth mistake is boundary negotiation. When people push back against your boundaries, some individuals try to find compromises or alternatives that make everyone happy. They negotiate different time frames, alternative arrangements, or modified versions of their original boundaries. While this seems reasonable and accommodating, it often leads to boundary erosion and continued pushing from others. Boundary negotiation sends the message that your boundaries are starting points for discussion rather than final positions. It encourages people to challenge your boundaries because they learn that pushing back often results in getting at least some of what they want. Over time, your boundaries shift further and further from your original position as you make concession after concession. Effective boundaries are non-negotiable. They're decisions you've made about how you want to allocate your time and energy, not opening positions in a negotiation. You can be flexible about how you interact within your boundaries, but the boundaries themselves should remain firm and consistent. The seventh and final major mistake is perfectionist boundary setting. Some people try to establish comprehensive boundary systems immediately, covering every possible situation and interaction. They create complex rules and protocols that are difficult to remember, explain, and maintain. When they inevitably fail to maintain these elaborate systems perfectly, they abandon boundary setting altogether. Effective boundary setting starts simple and evolves gradually. Begin with 1 or 2 clear, important boundaries that address your biggest availability problems. Master these basic boundaries before adding additional complexity. Build your boundary setting muscles with manageable limits before attempting more sophisticated systems. Avoiding these common mistakes is crucial for successfully implementing strategic unavailability. Each mistake undermines your efforts in different ways, but all of them share a common thread. They make your boundaries feel uncertain, negotiable, or temporary, rather than clear, consistent, and permanent. Understanding these pitfalls and actively avoiding them will dramatically increase your success in protecting your time, energy, and priorities. The boundaries you set are only as strong as your commitment to maintaining them. And that commitment requires recognizing and eliminating the self-sabotage patterns that destroy boundaries from within. Your boundaries don't fail because other people push against them. They fail because you allow them to fail. Everything changes, but not the way you think it will. When you stop being constantly available, you don't lose the relationships that matter. You lose the ones that were using you. You don't become lonely, you become selective. You don't sacrifice connection, you gain respect. The transformation isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about recognizing that your time is finite, your energy is precious, and your attention is the most valuable currency you possess, and then treating it that way. You've spent years giving yourself away, proving your worth through availability, confusing being needed with being valued, and it's left you exhausted, invisible, and wondering why nobody seems to appreciate everything you do. Now you know why. Constant availability destroys value. Strategic unavailability creates it. The relationships worth keeping will survive your boundaries. The career opportunities worth pursuing will respect your time. The life worth living requires you to protect the space to live it. Everything changes when you stop being constantly available. Your relationships become deeper. Your work becomes more meaningful. Your time becomes your own. And your worth stops being determined by how much you give and starts being recognized for who you are. The only question left is whether you're ready to claim it.